thank everyone for coming this evening. It's a rather small crowd, but it's an opportunity to have a very important conversation and to answer questions you may have, or just to have conversations about how this impacts our youth and our communities. So we're really glad that we're here tonight because this is such an important topic. So tonight we have Sarah, who has over 15 years of experience working with and on behalf of children and families. She is a certified youth mental health first aid trainer and has worked as a school counselor for the last decade. Through this work, she has had the opportunity to facilitate training on various topics, including suicide prevention. Sarah has also been on the forefront of creating, revising, and implementing suicide prevention policies and procedures for her district. Her passion for preventative mental health in schools and the desire to expand her reach beyond one district has brought her to Connors Cline Foundation. Sarah was also our guest speaker during our In-Service Day this year on September 20th, when we had our entire district here to have this required training, which is required by law, that we do this 2 hours of training every year, because New Hampshire has recognized the importance of the training, and that we as school personnel and also as community members have a huge responsibility given the children that we serve. So we're thankful that we're all here tonight to talk about this topic and to continue to promote mental health in our communities and wellness in our community as well. So a warm welcome to Sarah. Thanks for being here.
All right, so I'm excited to be back in Hampton. I always feel so welcome here. So thank you all for coming. I know many of you I've seen before. Many of you are school staff members, so thank you for always supporting. So tonight we're really just going to talk about suicide prevention from a community perspective. So when I was here for the district, we really focused on the educator perspective and how educators can work with students in their classrooms, or in the hallways, on their buses, or in the cafeteria, right? And how they can really kind of have conversations when they notice that a student may be struggling. And tonight is really more focused on the community and families. And so we're more talking about the youth that we all have in our lives on an everyday basis. So maybe our kids, our kids' friends, our nephews, our nieces, our cousins, whoever that is, whoever the young people are in our life. So some of this information will be very familiar to some of you that have done this before, but it does have a little bit of a different spin on it. So that's important. All right. So this is kind of the agenda for tonight. So part of what we're going to talk about is, so the first part is just suicide prevention basics. So really just risk factors for suicide, warning signs, kind of what to look for in your kids that might signal that they might be struggling a little bit with some mental health difficulties. And then we're going to talk a little bit about what children, specifically at Hampton Academy and at the high school at SAU 21, which is Winnisquam, right? Winnicott, I always get that mixed up. Winnisquam is in Tilden. I always get that mixed up. I'm sorry about that. So, the Winnisquam High School also uses the same program that I'm going to talk about tonight. So it's relevant to both districts, and that's the SOS Signs of Suicide program. So we're going to talk a little bit about what kids learn when they go into classrooms. Have the counselors started going into classrooms already this year? Okay. So students are already starting to learn this. So it's really important that the adults in their lives know what they're learning, and then how to react when their children may talk to them about the information that they're learning. And then so lastly, that's that last bullet is, so my kids are learning this, how can I help, and how can I help facilitate those conversations at home? So I just want to acknowledge right at the beginning, this can be a little bit of a challenging topic for anyone, really, for any number of reasons. We all bring different experiences to the table, and so any of this information may hit us in a different way at any point in time. So I just want to encourage everyone to just take care of themselves. If you feel like you need a break, feel free to take one. I'm not going to be offended if you just need to walk out, take a breath, get a drink of water, whatever you need to do. And there are plenty of people here that can support you if you need support, in addition to just kind of taking a breath. And then I just want to remind everyone about the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. Is everyone pretty familiar with that? Anyone not familiar? No, okay. So I'll explain it a little bit. So 988 is the number that you can call or text, or a youth can call or text when they're in a mental health crisis. So we're really trying in New Hampshire, or in nationwide, this is actually a nationwide number, nationwide, we're trying to really kind of start to equate mental health with physical health. So if you have a physical health emergency, you're dialing 911. And if you're in a mental health emergency, you're gonna dial 988. A couple things about 988. When you call from a New Hampshire cell phone, you are going to be connected to someone in New Hampshire, which is really exciting because if you are connected to someone in New Hampshire, they sometimes will be able to get you connected to the rapid response line, which are the people that can get mobile crisis units out to you to be able to assess if you're with a youth, or you're with someone else, or yourself. They can get out and assess you if that's what's necessary, and sometimes save you from having to go to the emergency room. The caveat to that is that if you are calling from if you're in New Hampshire but you're calling from a cell phone outside of New Hampshire, you are going to be routed to someone in whatever state your cell phone is routed to. That doesn't mean you're not going to get the same great triage. You're just not going to be able to be connected to that rapid response. So just kind of keeping that in mind. And so if tonight you need support and you're not, the support in the room isn't, you're not comfortable with that support, or for whatever reason you just feel like you need more, 988 is always available 24 hours a day. So just remembering that. All right, so just a little bit about Connors Climb. So we are a small nonprofit. We're based in Exeter, and so pretty close to you all. And the genesis of our organization was in 2011. Connor Ball died by suicide. He was 14. He was a freshman at Exeter High School. And his mom at the time decided that she didn't want any other family to have to go through what she had been through. And she knew she wanted to do something to make a difference in the lives of other kids her son's age, and particularly kids at Exeter High School where her son had attended. So she actually, this is a new part of her story that I hadn't heard. I think I shared it at the staff training last week, and I had just recently heard this part of her story, but she actually connected with a former Red Sox relief pitcher who had started an organization for his son who had died by suicide a few years prior, and that organization is called Will to Live, and that organization does the exact same thing that Connors Climb does in New Hampshire, in Georgia. So she really partnered with him, and he really helped her get Connors Climb started. And her first goal was to get suicide prevention education into Exeter High School. Happened really quickly, and then from there we just kind of grew. So since then, 30,000 students have benefited from the SOS Signs of Suicide program. That's the program that Hampton Academy and Winnicott use with their students. And they both, so Connors Climb funds schools throughout the state and helps with funding for that program. And so those 30,000 students are from about 90 schools throughout New Hampshire. It's actually a little bit more than that now. And then more than 10,000 trusted adults have been trained. So this training is considered a trusted adult training, and then the training that I do with staff members is also considered a trusted adult training. So those 10,000 trusted adults are from many different walks of life. So parents, family members, school staff members. I trained a couple camp staffs this summer, so a lot of different, from a lot of different walks of life. All right, so just a little bit about me. This is, so I have, as Lois mentioned, I've been working with children and families for most of my whole career. The last 10 years prior to coming to Connors Climb, I was a school counselor. So, and I was just talking to Angela about this prior to presenting tonight. And really the last few years, in the particular school I was in, I really felt like I was chasing crises, that I was really being reactive in my work and not able to be preventative. And it was a catch-22 because I knew that if I could do preventative work, that the crises would be lowered. And it was really wearing on me. And really, I knew that I really needed to do something where I was able to be more preventative. And this opportunity really just fell in my lap. So it's really been a fantastic opportunity to focus on prevention throughout the entire state, not just for my particular district, and hopefully I'm making school counselors' jobs easier in the long run. And you'll notice, so that one photo is of me on the side there. Those two photos, my reasons are not of me. Those are not of me, but they are the two biggest reasons why I do this work. I really want my children's schools and anyone who comes in contact with them to know how to recognize signs that they may be struggling, and then also to know how to, start initial conversations with them and know what to do if they happen to be one of my children's trusted adults. So I chose these particular two photos. We're going to talk about protective factors in a little bit, and one protective factor, one thing that really lowers a risk of suicide is finding a passion and really connecting with your community. So these two photos are my kids really living out their passions. So the top photo there is my daughter, Emily. She's 9, and cheerleading is her current passion. She's there at cheer camp. And then my son is named Connor. He loves me to say that Connor with one N, whereas Connor Ball is with 2 N's. He likes to make that distinction. And he is 15, and that is him. He played George Banks in a production of Mary Poppins Jr. a couple years ago and over the summer, and that is one of his current passions. He's also on the ski team at school, and those are the two things, and music, and those are the kind of the things that he really identifies with at the moment. All right, so Lois did mention the fact that this is sort of law, right? That it is the law that we need to train school staff to know how to react and know how to recognize warning signs in students, and that we need to talk with families and talk with the community about this. And Connors Climb really worked hard to get that law passed. That was something that really early on, Tara, our founder, had been working on that since really the beginning, and it finally got passed in 2019. I think the 2019-2020 school year was the first school year when it was supposed to be enacted, and then kind of the world shut down. So really that didn't get fully implemented in a lot of schools until the 2021, 2022, or 2021, 2020, 2021, or 2021, 2022 school year. But most schools are up and running with some sort of program at this point, which is fantastic. And really the reason that Tara was so invested in getting this law passed was because the research shows that the more education and the more people know about what to look for, the better chance we have of reducing suicide rates. And so just as a sort of scope of the problem slide here, suicide among 10 to 24-year-olds in New Hampshire, so that's kind of how we define youth in New Hampshire, is 10 to 24. Suicide is the second leading cause of death. That first leading cause of death is unintentional injury. So you guys, what's unintentional injury? What kind of deaths are those? Can you? A car accident. Yeah, what else? Drowning. I'm sorry? Overdose. I always think of ski accident because my kid's a skier. It always freaks me out. He was practicing at Gunstock the night that there was a death at Gunstock last year. It was the scariest thing. We didn't know about it until afterward, but it was so scary. But so that unintentional injury category is really large. There's a lot that kind of encompasses that, and suicide's a pretty narrow category. So suicide, some pretty specific things have to be in place. Hey, so glad you're here. The injury has to be intentional, it has to be with the intent to die, and it has to be self-inflicted. So that's a pretty narrow category as opposed to the big, broad category of unintentional injury. And so really, it's pretty remarkable that suicide is so close there to the unintentional injury, and the fact that it's the second leading cause of death. And I would say, on a personal note, my theory is that some deaths that are ruled unintentional injury may actually, in reality, be suicides. I think of overdoses when I say that. Sometimes car accidents, we never know if a car accident is accidental or not, right? Particularly with older adolescents. So I do think that those two categories are probably closer together, but just the fact that it's number 2 really should give us all pause and really have us all kind of thinking about this. All right, so we know that suicide's a problem, right? We don't have to dig too deep into the numbers to see that, suicide is the second leading cause of death for our teens, or for our young adults and our adolescents in New Hampshire. In fact, that's countrywide too, but specifically to New Hampshire. And so then that just gets us thinking, why is this happening? And so the short answer is we really don't know. Like, we don't know why teens choose, and why any young person chooses to attempt to end their life. It's a really complicated puzzle, and we really don't know. Even when we talk to people who have attempted suicide and we kind of ask them questions, not me personally, but when researchers sort of ask questions later in life or whatever, those people that attempted really aren't able to articulate it either. It's really just a complicated puzzle, right? We do have some ideas of why people, or some things that contribute to why this particular solution, people choose this particular solution. So it could be maybe there's some untreated depression or untreated mental health diagnosis, excess drinking or drug use, isolation or withdrawal, loss of hope, access to guns, or really access to any lethal means, any means by which they could die. And then having thoughts of suicide obviously is going to lead to, may lead to attempting suicide. Of course. Absolutely, we're going to talk about bullying. Thank you for saying that. Yeah, absolutely, bullying. So bullying, we'll talk about this a little bit in more detail in a minute, but just because you asked, I just want to address it. So bullying and suicide are positively correlated with each other. So when one goes up, the other goes up. It's really hard to talk about causation. So we don't know whether or not one causes the other, but what we do know is that bullying increases some of the risk factors that are present in young people that are either having suicidal thoughts or attempting suicide. So we definitely know that it is, bullying increases isolation sometimes, which is a risk factor. Sometimes bullying increases drug use or substance use. Sometimes bullying increases, it infects someone's self-esteem, and low self-esteem we know is a risk factor. So yes, bullying definitely does affect it, and they do rise together. Does that make sense? Yeah, thank you for the question. All right, so we break down sort of the reasons into a few different categories. So the first category is risk factors. So a risk factor is something that is present in a youth's life, or anyone's life, but we're talking about youth tonight. So something that's present in a youth's life that, I'm gonna take this off here. I'm feeling very, I'm like standing at the podium. So a risk factor is something that happens in a youth's life that's present either within their own personality or kind of within their environment that increases their risk for suicide. So I find that most of the time people kind of inherently know this. So what are some things that you can think of that may increase someone's risk for suicide? What do you think? Like you already mentioned, being exposed to bullying. What else? Can you think of anything else that might just be inherently? Isolation, depression. Yep, having really any mental health diagnosis. Yep, anything else you can think of? Yeah, so we know that poverty is definitely a risk factor. Yep, poverty is a risk factor. Yeah, most people, I mean, this is like, most of the time people are really intuitive about it. Like, you have the information, you just haven't thought about it necessarily, right? And I'm sure when I put up my list, it's gonna be pretty, did you have something? Did I see your hand? Yeah, abuse and neglect is a risk factor for sure, yep. Really, any trauma is a risk factor. Anything else anyone could think of? No? Okay, I'll show you my list. You guys are gonna, oh, go ahead. Health problems, like a chronic health problem? Yep, absolutely. So a health problem, a brain injury is another risk factor. Yeah, definitely, especially like in older populations. So we're talking about youth tonight, but I did some work with core physicians, and around suicide prevention, they had an incident, so they asked me to come in and do some training around it. And that's what they were saying is with older populations, sometimes they see that, and they really, when they make that kind of a diagnosis, like a chronic illness diagnosis, they always want to assess the protective factors that that person has. So they assess the support system that they have and all of that stuff. So yeah, that's really important. All right, I'm just gonna put them all out here. I'm not gonna make you guys wait on bated breath. But so we talked about depressive disorders or any mental health diagnosis. Substance abuse in youth, it's really any substance use at all. We want to make sure that we're paying attention to that. That's definitely a risk factor. Kids that tend to have trouble at school, that tend to struggle a little bit more at school, are at a higher risk for suicidal ideation, which is thinking about suicide or suicide attempts. We talked about social isolation. We talked about low self-esteem. Poor problem-solving skills. So we know that suicide is a solution to a problem, that problem being intense psychological pain. So we know that when a student or when a youth has trouble kind of thinking outside the box and doesn't have those skills to really think about other solutions, we know that sometimes that causes them to kind of focus on the one solution that they can see, which may be a suicide attempt. Interpersonal difficulties, so having difficulty, making friends, or, having even kind of losing a friend group along the way or something like that can put someone at risk. A history of bullying, as you mentioned, can put someone at risk. So when this happened last time too. I'm not sure why some of my risk factors don't come up when I send the presentation to Google Slides, so I don't know why that happened. But so some that are imaginary on that other list there are LGBTQ plus members of that community are at a higher risk, not because they're members of that community, but because they do suffer from discrimination at a higher level than the general population of youth. Not having access to behavioral health care and also not having access to physical health care is a risk factor for suicidal ideation and suicidal attempts. So we know that sometimes depression and suicidal ideation may manifest as more physical problems. So sometimes kids will complain about stomach aches or headaches, particularly younger kids, because they don't necessarily know how to articulate what they're feeling or what they're thinking and what they're feeling in their brain. It's really much easier and more concrete for them to kind of articulate what's going on in their physical body. So the more that our young people can have relationships with their pediatricians, and the more our pediatricians can really know how to ask the right questions to kind of get to the bottom of physical symptoms, the more we're going to reduce risk. So not having access to that is going to increase someone's risk. All right, it's not letting me continue. All righty. Give me 1 second, I'm sorry. All right. right. I don't know why it's not letting me. I'm just going to go to the next slide here. Where's the slideshow? All right. All right. So the second kind of category is a precipitating event. So a precipitating event is something that happens in a youth's life that may move them from sort of thinking about suicide and kind of thinking that, just kind of thinking about it to actually acting upon it. So it's important to remember that no one event is going to cause a suicide. We can never say that, one specific thing caused a suicide death. But we do know that there are sometimes events that kind of are like that last straw, or the things that, like the straw that breaks the camel's back, or that one thing that happened that kind of moved them from thinking about suicide to actually attempting it. And that's why it's really important to kind of know what's going on in our kids' lives. So really making sure that we just know what's going on. We're talking to our kids, we're having conversations about what's happening at school, what's happening with their friends. So that we're able to kind of keep on top of it, because you just never know. So some examples of that, a single bullying incident. So one particular bullying incident, maybe that one event. Any kind of breakup, so like a breakup with a friend or a breakup of a romantic relationship. Sudden death of a loved one, changes in home life, so a divorce, a separation. It could be very traumatic for a young person. A family move, so that could be the young person themselves moving, or it could be someone moving that the person is close to. I know, my 15-year-old, when he was in 8th grade, he had both his best friend move to Alabama, which was, and it was sort of a sudden move, and his trusted adult at school, who happened to be the assistant principal, took another job, all in the same year. And for him, those two events by themselves, to someone who wasn't struggling, he may have been able to be a little more resilient, but he also had a lot of other stuff going on in his life at that time. And those two things really made it so 8th grade was a really tough year for him, and we ended up at the ER more than once. So it really can be anything, and it can be something that another kid may just sail right through, or something as adults we're looking at and saying, why is that such a big deal, right? It's really from the perspective of the youth. And then a social change, so like a change in social status maybe, or, like those dreaded middle school years where you were friends all through elementary school, and then all of a sudden you're not friends anymore, right? I feel like middle school, high school, that's when that starts to happen, and it's no fun for anyone. All right, and then lastly, our warning signs. So warning signs are really those things that we see in our kids that may indicate that they might be struggling. And we do know that most people who attempt suicide give some sort of warning. So the more that we can all be aware of some of those warning signs, and the more we can learn about them, the better we're going to get at preventing suicide. We're not going to get them all. There are always going to be suicide deaths where everyone in the person's life is like, I did not see that coming, and it is always a tragedy when someone dies from suicide. And it's even more, it seems like even more of a tragedy when we don't see it coming at all, and we don't remember seeing any warning signs, even in hindsight. And I can't tell you that that's never going to happen. If you learn about warning signs, that's never going to happen. But I do know the research supports the fact that the more we know about warning signs, and the more we know about what to look for, the better we're going to get at preventing suicide, and that's really the goal. Connors Climb's vision is that no family will lose a child to suicide in New Hampshire, and that's our vision. We know that's a really lofty vision, but we're getting there, and we're working toward it every day. And the more people we can educate, the better. All right, so I want you guys to kind of do some work here about warning signs. So what are some things, because I really do feel like we all have it in us, we just maybe have not thought about it in that way. So
what are things that you might see in your kids or in your students if you're a school employee that might indicate that maybe they're struggling with some mental health difficulties? What might you notice? Loss of appetite, weight loss, yep. Yeah, not doing the things that they used to like to do. Yep, absolutely, that's a big one. Grades dropping, right? Yeah. Oh, yeah, changes in hygiene, right? Yep. Yeah, it can go either way. That's a really important point to remember, is that a mood change can go either way. So sometimes a kid that used to be happy-go-lucky and used to be really engaged and, you know, really wanting to engage with the family, engage with friends, all of a sudden they're not that way anymore. That could definitely be a sign that they're struggling. The opposite is also true, though, and sometimes this is just not something that's in everyone's consciousness, but when a kid has been struggling and has been really down in the dumps and withdrawn and not really engaging, and then all of a sudden, it's usually a quick change, and it's all of a sudden, and they're almost euphoric, that could mean, it could be a warning sign, it could mean that they've made a plan, and that they've made a plan, and we know, as I said before, suicide is a solution to a problem, so they feel happy because they've solved their problem, not in a healthy way. So, you know, as parents of these young people, we're gonna probably know whether or not that's the case, because sometimes it's that they've gotten treatment and maybe they've started taking medicine, maybe they have a really good therapist, and that has really helped. And as their parents, we're gonna know that, right? And we're gonna know that probably that's the case. Whereas if without any intervention, all of a sudden that's happened, that might be more of a warning sign for us. Does that make sense? All right, anything else anyone can think of before I show you my list? No? All right. All right, so increased substance use. It says increased, but really any substance use. If you know that any youth that you care about is using any sort of substance, you're gonna get your little antenna up. It may not mean that they're thinking about suicide or that they're gonna attempt suicide, but it probably does mean that something's going on. You wanna actually just put your antenna up and think about that a little bit more. Pay more attention to that. Any change in mood, we just talked about. Really any change in behavior, so like an increase in risky behavior or just doing things that aren't typical for them. Someone said today, I was actually in Greenland today, and someone said that, you know, I hadn't thought about this in this way before, but we often talk about withdrawal from like regular activities, like the extracurriculars, right? But sometimes when youth get hyper-focused on a specific activity, that can also be a sign that they're struggling. And I just hadn't thought about that before in that way. Like I think, again, intuitively I knew it, but I hadn't really thought about that. So just a reminder. Sleep issues. As parents, we're really the ones that are gonna know about sleep issues maybe before someone else. You know, staff in schools see the effects of it. They see, you know, their students sleeping in class or whatever, but it's the parents, the families that are really gonna know first. Withdrawal, we talked about that. Changes in weight. So if you see a youth, you know, maybe eating a lot more than prior to, or eating less, a big weight gain or a big weight loss, all of that is a sign that they could be struggling. Problems thinking or concentrating. So when we talk about this being a new kind of symptom. So we know that when someone is struggling with anxiety or depression, their thinking sort of becomes cloudy. So just remembering that if this is a new symptom, that they could be struggling with anxiety or depression. And then we talked about poor hygiene. All right, let's see. Yep, okay. All right, so I told you we're gonna talk a little bit more about bullying. So as I mentioned, persistent bullying can lead to or worsen feelings of isolation, rejection, exclusion, despair, depression, and anxiety, all of which increase someone's risk for suicidal ideation. So sort of indirectly, the bullying is affecting the suicidal ideation. It's really important to remember that everyone in a bullying situation is at an increased risk for suicide. So it's not just the victim. And in a school situation, that's really important to remember because everyone in this situation, the target, the bully, and the bystanders or the upstanders really do need interventions and support at some level. So both the perpetrator and the victim are at elevated risks. And the research does show us that those students that we refer to as, or the youth that we refer to as bully victims, so those are the youth that are targets of bullying, and then they also bully others. Those are the youth that are at the highest risk for suicidal ideation and suicidal behavior. So just remembering that. And really just, thinking about the fact that although youth that are bullying others do need to be held responsible for their behavior, absolutely, they also need support and resources and interventions because there's a reason that that's happening. There's a reason that, that they're bullying, typically. All right, alcohol use. So we talked about alcohol use or substance use in general. So while any substance use, any alcohol use is definitely a reason to be concerned, there are two specific behaviors that are pretty strongly correlated with suicidal ideation and suicidal behavior in youth. Those are drinking while down. So when a youth is already depressed and they're sort of in a depressive episode and they are drinking, that increases their risk for suicidal ideation or suicidal attempts. And the second is heavy episodic drinking. So that is drinking a lot of drinks in a short amount of time. So I sometimes refer to it as binge drinking. And those are the two alcohol-related behaviors that increase someone's risk of suicide. All right. So non-suicidal self-injury is also a risk factor and a warning sign for suicidal behavior. Does everyone know what when I say non-suicidal self-injury, everyone know what I mean? So when you see signs of non-suicidal self-injury, that does not mean that a student or that a youth is suicidal. What it does mean, generally, is that youth is struggling and that they are using self-harm as a coping skill. So whatever they're doing to harm themselves is helping them get through and feel better about whatever they're struggling with. And that does increase their risk for moving from non-suicidal self-injury to actually engaging in suicidal behavior in the future. So it is definitely a risk factor. And what works best is when we see that is working with students and getting youth help with typically a mental health therapist to really work on working out and finding some healthy coping skills so that they can replace that unhealthy coping skill of self-harm with their healthy coping skills, and that's going to reduce their risk for suicide or suicidal behavior in the future. Go ahead. Yes. Yeah, it could be anything really. I did have a student when I was a counselor. I had a student that pretty much every day got scratched by her cat. So I knew that probably wasn't accurate, right? I've had students that pull out their hair. I mean, my own kid has pulled out his hair in the past. I've had students that burn themselves. I've had students that just, I say just, but it's a serious thing, but that snap rubber bands on their arms. Sometimes that's a sensory saying, and that's a coping skill if it's not harming them. But when they do it to the point where it's harmful, that's a form of self-harm. So it really can be anything. Or having an accident that you think may be on purpose, right, is also a form of self-harm. Yep. That's a great question. Thank you. All right, so I did just want to, I'm not going to read you all these statistics, but they are all, they were all staggering to me the first time I saw them, so I just wanted to put them up there. So a couple things I just want to point out, though. LGBTQ plus youth are in general at a higher risk of suicidal behavior than other youth their age. That is the facts. All this data is from 2022. It's from the Trevor Project, who does a survey every year. And the two things that jumped out to me most in this data was that 20%, the first is that 20% of trans youth have attempted suicide at least once in their life. So that's 1 in 5. 1 in 5 trans youth have attempted suicide. It's a huge number. And then the second thing that really stood out to me was the role of discrimination. So when you break out LGBTQ plus youth that report they've been discriminated against, and then those that do not report discrimination, the portion of that community that report having been discriminated against, the percentage is about 19% of them have attempted suicide, whereas in the group that has not reported any discrimination, it's only about 7%. And that 7%, it is 7, right? Yeah, okay. And that 7% is very similar to the general population of youth. So that really does show us that it is the role of discrimination that really causes or is correlated with the suicide attempts. And so what we can take from that is that as much as we can, we need to make the world a safe place for these students or for these youth, and we really need to work to make our schools safe and our homes safe and our communities safe. It's really important, and it's really going to save lives. And the more we can reduce the suicide deaths in this population, we're going to reduce the suicide deaths overall for all youth as well. All right, so how can we help? So one thing that Hampton Academy is doing, among many other things, is using this SOS Signs of Suicide program with all of the youth in the school, all of the 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. Is that you use it with? Okay. And so SOS is a universal program. It's designed by Mindwise, which is it's the company that wrote the program. And it's a universal program, which means that it's delivered to all students in a school. And there's 2 different programs. There's a middle school program and a high school program. The middle school program is evidence-based for grades 6 through 8, and then the high school is 9 through 12. So Hampton Academy uses the middle school version, and they roll it out to all 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. Excuse me. And it teaches students to notice warning signs and risk factors within themselves and within their peers. And then it helps students learn what to do when they notice those signs and how to start conversations with their peers, with their friends or their acquaintances, and then how to get that person to the help that they need. So how to identify who a trusted adult is in the building or in their home, and how to talk to that trusted adult and tell them their concerns. So as I mentioned, it's evidence-based. So the evidence says that students are 64% less likely to report engaging in a suicide attempt. About 1.5 million students are trained annually. And the basic formula for the program is that students watch a video, and then there's a discussion afterwards. So, and in each grade, there's different videos that they watch. We're going to watch one in a little bit, the one that is recommended for 8th graders, and Angela just let me know that it is the one that 8th graders do see at Hampton Academy. And then there's follow-up. So after the presentation, facilitators will follow up with students that say that they want to talk to someone, or if the facilitators are concerned about someone, they'll follow up with them. So there's follow-up. And the acronym that SOS teaches them is ACT. So ACT stands for Acknowledge, Care, and Tell. So the A is acknowledge, and so we talk to them, and I don't actually present the program very often, but the facilitators talk to students about acknowledging signs of suicide or depression in a friend. or in yourself. So we talk about it both in terms of noticing it in the people around you and noticing it in yourself. Because sometimes youth may be feeling these big feelings and not know why, or not recognize that it might be something that they can get help for and that they can get better. And then showing your friend that you care. So noticing the signs, acknowledging that they're serious, talking to your friend a little bit and saying, you know what, I care about you. You know, I texted you 4 times last night and you didn't respond. You haven't been hanging out with us after school anymore. I'm really worried about you. You know, let me help. What can I do to help? And then making sure that we impart into the youth that they need to tell someone when they're concerned, when they think that they may be struggling or they think their friend may be struggling, that they need to tell someone. It's really important that an adult know what's going on so that they're able to tell, so that the adults are able to help. So, when students are acknowledging to their friend that they may have noticed that something's going on, they may say something like, "Hey, I have noticed that you haven't been coming to practice lately. Is everything okay?" Or, "You haven't seemed like yourself lately. Do you want to talk about it?" Something like that. We know that kids have their own style with their friends, but something like that. And then showing that you care. So it's okay to feel that way. Tell me more. I'm here for you. Any of those things will work. And then tell a trusted adult. This is the part that really the program really drives home, is that you need to be telling trusted adults. This isn't information about yourself or about your peers that you want to keep inside. So if you're worried that your friend is thinking about suicide, you need to tell a trusted adult. Do not promise to keep it a secret. So making sure that we talk really about secrets and confidences and kind of the difference and kind of what things are okay to keep secret and what things are not okay. And then just remembering that your friend may be mad at you if you tell an adult, right? They may not want you to tell, but it is a life and death situation, and sort of just remembering that, reminding youth that they're saving someone's life when they're telling an adult. So, that being said, Hampton Academy is teaching your kids to do all that. So then they say, "Mom, Dad, I really need to tell you something. I'm worried about Sarah. She's not acting the way that she used to, whatever." So then, what the heck are you going to do, right? So we told them to tell you. Now they're telling you. So now what do you do? So you're going to listen to your kids' concerns, encourage them to seek help, right? Know who the resources are in your school or in your community, so that if you need more help, if they need more help than you can give them, you know where to go. So kind of prepare for that and know ahead of time. You may need to contact the friend's parents. I know this is sometimes an awkward conversation, but really even something like, "Hey, Sarah told me that this is going on. I'm not sure. This could be just Sarah's perspective." You know, you can have the conversation any way you want, but it's really imperative that you let the other parents know that at least your child is concerned. And maybe your child is way off base, but your child is concerned enough to come to you. You may want to contact the school, either the school counselors at the school or the staff or the administration, so they can help that child. You know, "Hey, Sarah came home yesterday and told me that she's really worried about Susie, and you know, I don't know what's going on, but I just thought that someone at the school should know." Probably the school counselor is going to check in with that person the next day just to make sure. If you're concerned about the child's immediate safety, you really want to call 911. So if your child says something like, you know, "Sarah said she was going to go home and that she had a gun hidden under her bed, and I can't get a hold of her," or Sarah was really down today at school. Her parents aren't home tonight. Her parents are working, and she's not answering my texts. Stuff like that, you need to call 911. You need to make sure that the child is safe. And then always just reassuring your child that they did the right thing, even if they are wrong. Even if they're wrong, they did the right thing because they're concerned about their friend. And just reassuring them is going to go a long way. So just some some resources. So your child's pediatrician is always a resource for you. I work more and more with pediatricians, and I really think that they're getting better and better at dealing with mental health crises and just mental health in general. Your school counselor is always here to help you. Here at Hampton Academy, or in the district, there's a suicide prevention team. I think most of them are here tonight. So feel free to talk to them. And then again, for immediate safety, just make sure you're calling 911. You can also call 988 if you're just not sure what to do. 988 is going to be able to help you with that as well. And then I know, is it you that has the details about the see something, say something? Do you want to, will you just share that? Sure. All of that? Okay.
So SAU 90 is connected with SAU 21, and we just let everybody know that there's a see something, say something button on our website, on every web page for both SAUs. So if anyone has any concerns about anything at all, you can just write in that button, and we convene monthly, and we talk about any child that needs to be discussed. We pull in parents and suicide prevention teams, and we're an umbrella for all the kids in SAU 90 and SAU 21.
It's just a really unique resource that I haven't ever found in any other district, so I always like to highlight it. That's really amazing. So if you're not comfortable calling that kid's parents, right, at the very least, push that see something, say something button, and then you know that the child will at least be on someone's radar. And then 988 is always available for, so 988 is available for your youth. If your youth is worried about their friend, they can also call 988 and talk to someone about it. 988, you can also text 988, and then there's also a specific text crisis line that you can use as well. All right. So as important as it is to have the tools for when your student comes to you in maybe a crisis situation, it's also important that we're just talking to our kids on a regular basis about mental health and just having those conversations, really normalizing the conversation that mental health is just another thing that we talk about, right? It's not, we don't sit down and have the big talk like we do around, or my parents did with me around like sex ed or whatever, right? We're birds and the bees. We're really just kind of talking about mental health all the time. I know in my house we are, it's just something that we do. And this is tough because it hasn't always been that way. I think it's getting more and more to the point where we can just kind of talk about it, but it hasn't always been like that. And it is, although we're getting closer and closer, mental health is not the same as physical health as far as the way we talk about it yet. I'm hoping we will get there. I think we're getting closer. And then feelings of depression and anxiety, kids don't often talk about them because sometimes they don't, if it's not talked about in the home, they don't know what's going on. They don't know why they're having these big feelings. And so they don't want to talk about them because it makes them feel different. So making sure that you're having these conversations throughout your child's life is really going to go a long way with getting them to be able to talk to you at a later date. I actually, I had someone ask me recently, I can't remember which training it was at, about, so if we're talking about this and we're talking about anxiety and depression and suicidal ideation, isn't that going to make kids think that they're struggling with all this stuff when really they're not, right? And I really don't think that's the case. I think that, the more that we talk about it, the more it's just going to be okay to talk about it, and it's going to be okay to talk it through. So maybe they do think that maybe they're struggling with anxiety. You have a conversation with them, and really they're just worried about their math test tomorrow, right? Which is sort of a healthy anxiety to have because that's going to hopefully get them to study, right? So you can kind of talk that through with them and really kind of work on that. So that was just a question that was asked to me recently that kind of got me thinking. So just asking open-ended questions. So I'm guilty of this. How was your day today? Good, right? More like, hey, who did you talk to today? What was the most exciting thing that happened in your day today? What made you upset today? Did anything make you upset today? Those kind of questions. And then, especially in the adolescent years, kids don't want you to solve their problems. They want you to just kind of be there, and they want you to listen. So don't be in a rush to solve the problems. Kind of try to work with them, be their coach, be their partner in solving their problems. And trust me, you do know more than they do. You've been through more than they have, but they don't think that at this moment. And the more you can sort of just be their coach, the better. Not that there aren't times when you have to kind of make decisions for them because their brains are not developed, but as much as you can. And then sometimes your kid's not going to want to talk. You're going to start you think you have this great prompt to start this conversation about mental health, and your kid's like clamming up, right? Then you're like, okay, I'm here. Please know I'm here. If you want to talk to me at a later time, I'll let you think over what I said, and we can talk about it later. So I know it's hard, but we try not to be pushy as parents. I am the worst at that. So just some tips for getting kids to talk to you. Having regular family meetings, I know that sounds corny, but it really does it really does work. And letting your adolescents or letting your kids take the lead on those. Like, what do you want to talk about? I think that we spend a lot of time, we just recently started doing something similar to this in our house. And I think we do, as parents, we spend a lot of time kind of putting down the rules and trying to set expectations and set routines. And so we've tried to give our children a little bit more space to kind of tell us, what's going well in our routine in our family and what's not, and how can we make it better together, that kind of stuff. Sometimes just playing a game. Sometimes there's some specific games specific to mental health that you can find online or find in your school counselor's office. I have a ton of them at home after I cleaned up my school counselor office. But sometimes just playing a game with them, just playing a card game, conversations are gonna naturally come up. Sometimes, if the subject comes up in a movie or a TV show, kind of having a discussion about it. I know that there's a lot of, I know this is sort of an old one now, but 13 Reasons Why. There's some controversy around whether or not that's something that should be shown, and kind of the fact that it glamorizes suicide a little bit. And just having those, and if your kid wants to watch that, that's okay. And then having those frank conversations with them about, okay, so do you think that's what happens really? Do you think that's what really happens when someone dies from suicide? Do you think that, do you think that I didn't watch the show, so I'm just sort of going by flying by the seat of my pants here, just from what I've heard. But, do you think that do you think that someone gets, put on a pedestal when they die, when they die by suicide, and just kind of having those conversations. Sometimes just out for a walk. Kids will open up on a walk. This next one is my go-to. I drive my kid to school every day, and I'm telling you, the things that he says to me when he does not have to look me in the eye is amazing. We're both looking at the road, and he just opens up, and things come out of his mouth that I just never thought would happen. So I kind of said this already, but not kind of having one big talk. So just kind of making it a lot of mini talks, like a lot of just kind of, it's always there in the background, and you're always talking about mental health. Maybe you're always talking about, we do like a high and a low from each day, like at the dinner table each night. And so we go around the table and we talk about what our high was, what our low was. When we talk about our lows, we kind of talk about how we got over them and what we're going to do differently to not let that happen again if it was something that was sort of in our control, that kind of stuff. And then this is a really hard one, but enlisting other trusted adults. Knowing that not at every stage of their life, even if you have the best relationship with your kid, you are not always going to be the one that they want to talk to. And so knowing and finding the other adults that they're comfortable with. That could be someone at school, that could be an aunt, that could be a grandparent. My son has a therapist, and he typically talks with her and talks through things with her so that he can then talk things through with me. And she kind of gives him word choices because it's really high stakes with me. And that's typically how it is with parents. It's higher stakes, and it's easier sometimes to talk to someone else first. So it's really hard not to get your feelings hurt when that happens, though, especially when you have good relationships with your kids. All right, so another good resource for parents is this SOS Parent page. So this is a website that parents can go to, and you can go to this website whether or not your school uses the SOS Signs of Suicide program. It's an open website. And you can really kind of just take a look at the program, really. So it just talks about what SOS is. So here you can view, these are the middle school and the high school videos. It's not the whole videos, but you can view snippets of the videos that your kids are gonna see. So you kind of know on the day that they're gonna go through the SOS program, you kind of know what they're seeing, right? I don't know, does Hampton Academy use the depression screening or no? No, okay. So SOS does come with a depression screener, but many schools do not use it. Hampton Academy is one that does not. The exit slip, we do use the exit slip though, right? So then there's an exit slip. So every time a student goes through the SOS program, they have the option of, they have to fill out a form, or they don't have to, but they're requested to fill out a form, and they can check whether, yes, I want to talk to someone about myself or about a friend, or nope, I'm all set, I don't need to talk to anyone today. What would you say is a percentage of kids that want to talk? Out of how many? Okay, so about 15 kids indicated that they wanted to talk after the program, so I don't have the math in my head to do that. What'd you say? Oh, thank you. See, there you go. I guess that would make sense. That was an easy one. You can tell why I do this. And then there's just some tips for encouraging the conversation at home. So kind of expanding on what I've already said. And then again, these are just more resources, more kind of expanding on stuff that I've already said. So just talking about risk and how to reduce risk in your kids. Talks about warning signs, kind of some tips on how to talk to your kid. And then here are some resources. So this is a handout for parents. I actually have copies of this one tonight. So if anyone wants to take this home with them. So this just talks about, it talks about the ACT acronym and then kind of what to look out for in your kids. Oh, I'm used to an Apple or a MacBook. And then there's a couple videos just for parents here. So these are not ones that students see, but they're parent videos. And then this one here is, this is a parent video. So in high school, one of the videos is Ellie's story. And Ellie is I believe she's a college student who's kind of telling her story. So Connor is a high school student who's telling his story to middle schoolers. Ellie's a college student who's telling her story to high schoolers. And this video is from the perspective of Ellie's parents. So Ellie's parents are really telling their story of Ellie's struggle with mental health. So it's a really good, if you have a chance to go on the website and watch it, I would definitely do that. And then it talks about, if you're a numbers person, this really talks about all of the evidence base. There's been a lot of research around this program, and you can get all the details there on that website. So that is a really great resource to look at. I did want to show you, I did not mean to do that. I did want to show you just one of the videos that all eighth graders will see. This is Connor's story. Connor is as I mentioned, a high schooler who started his mental health struggles in elementary school, and kind of he tells his story. He's now in a better place. He's now a happy high schooler with lots of experience under his belt, and he just kind of tells his story. So I'm just going to show you this quickly. It's just about 5 minutes, so.
Today we're going to learn about suicide prevention. You'll hear from some experts and Connor, a student whose friend acted to get him help when he was struggling. This can be a difficult topic to think about, but it's important to learn how we can help each other. Just remember, ACT. Acknowledge signs of suicide in a friend. Show your friend that you care. Tell a trusted adult. ACT is how you remember the 3 steps to help yourself or a friend. It might just save someone's life.
My name is Connor Lee, and I'm 16 years old. When I was a child, I would say I was very energetic. I was very extroverted. I liked to hang out with my friends a lot. I was diagnosed with ADHD at a pretty young age. There were a bunch of challenging times for me. I was bullied a lot, and I started to hate myself. So the depression sort of started at elementary school age. It didn't get too severe until towards the end of middle school. I actually felt sad like all the time. I just felt drained of like all positive emotion. I wouldn't do schoolwork. I didn't really want to talk to anybody. Every time I got home, I sort of just like laid down and just accepted nothingness.
Feeling sad is usually a temporary thing that's related to something that happened in someone's life or some situation or event. Feeling depressed is when someone is experiencing maybe sad feelings and probably a bunch of other kinds of things that feel bad too over a long period of time, and that it's getting in the way of doing things that people typically like to do.
Depression impacts many parts of your life. It causes big changes in your feelings and actions. It can cloud your thinking and increase risk for suicide.
I felt, even with my friends, I was alone. I wanted to be funny, so I put on a face for my friends, but on the inside I was just hurting. I felt like I wasn't enough for the people around me, and I felt like I could be doing so much more, but I just couldn't. I just started to feel like alone, and that I didn't matter, and that maybe I was just better off just not being alive.
I think because we know our friends, we tend to know when something is a little bit off, regardless of whether or not they openly state that they want help or that something's wrong. And stating that, hey, I am here for you, I want to help you.
My girlfriend at the time, she decided that she would take initiative and she would go talk to the school counselor. At that point, I was starting to feel suicidal. I talked to her about it a couple times. One of the things the school counselor made me do was she handed me a paper to ask, on a scale of 1 to 10, how do you feel on most days? How many times have you had suicidal thoughts? Which really made me see that this was much bigger than I had thought it was before. I was tired of hiding, so I made a post about it, telling everyone how I was actually feeling and that I had been portraying this character to them and it wasn't actually me. It got a lot of support, and I think it helped make me feel better.
So the majority of people who are thinking about suicide have something like depression, either depression or some other mental health condition going on. Depression is definitely something that is treatable, and people feel much better afterwards. So there are different ways that people can feel better. One of them is by taking medication. Sometimes it's also by going to counseling and talking to someone to talk through problems or to think about other ways to cope.
So some healthy coping strategies would be connecting with others. So making sure that you're not isolating yourself, but that you're spending time with your friends. Exercising as well. So if you're an athlete, just making sure that you're continuing to take part in those activities, as well as journaling. So if you're someone who likes to write, using that as a mode of self-expression.
I went to therapy, and the first session I felt very awkward. I didn't want to be there. I didn't want to talk about it. It did help though. Getting to actually talk about it, even though it was awkward, getting to say how I felt to someone. I am in a good place now, and the things that help me are, theater is a big one, because that's my passion. One of the bigger parts of my life is that I play guitar. I also use it, just like theater, as another way to find an escape, to go home and I can play guitar and I can be happy with that. And I'm really happy that I can be myself and be who I want to be.
All right. So that is one of the videos that kids see in the SOS program. That's, like I said, the 8th grade video. All right, so as we're sort of starting to wrap up here, just remembering that these conversations are difficult, and it's difficult to sit here tonight and hear about all these statistics and all this bad news. Hopefully there was a little bit of hope too. But give yourself permission to be human. Make sure we're taking care of ourselves. Make sure we have people in our lives that we can talk to. And then just making sure that we remember that as much as we are telling our kids not to keep what they learn a secret, we can't either. So if our kids are concerned about a friend, but they come to you and say that their friend's going to be mad at you and they don't want you to do anything with the information, it really is imperative that you share that information. So just remembering that we do all need to, it takes a village, right? And we all need to take care of each other. And then just touching on protective factors. So protective factors really are just the opposite of risk factors. So these are all things that reduce someone's risk of suicidal ideation and suicidal behavior. So the more that we can really help to bolster these in our kids, the lower our kids are going to be, their risk is going to be for suicidal behavior. So having effective coping skills, kind of knowing what helps your kids when they're stressed, like what do they do that helps them, whether it's, Connor said that his was theater and guitar. Maybe your kids are athletes, or, maybe they, like to journal or like to write or like to draw, any of that. Having a reason for living, so knowing what your kids are looking forward to is really important. A strong sense of cultural identity, so just kind of talking about that in your household, whatever that culture is. It doesn't, I'm not just talking about the traditional sense of culture. Healthy relationships, so having a healthy relationship with you, and then having other healthy relationships. Being connected at school. We talked about, so the next two are kind of the opposite of, having access to that health care that we talked about earlier, and then having reduced access to any lethal means, anything that they could use to attempt suicide. And then having a cultural, moral, or religious objection to suicide. So if that's something that is true in your family or in your culture, making sure you're sharing that with your kids, so that that doesn't mean that they're less likely to struggle with mental health disorders, but it does mean they're less likely to see suicide as a solution. So that's something positive. So just making sure that we're encouraging connection to school. School connectedness is a very strong protective factor. So, helping them find the activities that they're going to be passionate about is really important. Helping them stay connected to friends even when they're not feeling like it. And then letting your child know that you're always there. You're always there to listen, and you can help, and having the confidence to know that you know what to do to help them. And then coping skills, just building up their coping skills is going to be helpful. These are just a few of the more common coping skills, but they don't work for everyone. Everyone has their own individual. But exercise, having a gratitude practice, there's been a lot of research about that, just talking about what you're grateful for every day, either writing it down or telling it to someone else, just saying it out loud in the mirror, whatever your practice is, talking to family and friends, listening to music, and it could be anything. It took me a long time to realize that Minecraft can be a coping skill. Like, it's okay, right? It's not his only coping skill, but it is a coping skill, and it's okay. So this is just a resource that Connor's Climb offers. So if you are interested, please send me an email if you're interested in getting a stack of these or any of these. They are our mental health action plan cards, and they're really just a tool to start the conversation with kids around mental health. So you can talk to kids about what a trusted adult is, who are the trusted adults in their life, help them write a list of their trusted peers. And then on the back, the notes section, you can do anything you want with that. I tend to suggest writing down some coping skills, so talking about what helps them when they're stressed and then having them actually write it down. Sometimes when people write things down, they remember them and they actually think about them a little more. So you can email me. I can send you copies of these. You can also just get them right on our website if you wanted to print your own. So I have a couple plugs for Connors Climb because we are a nonprofit, and then that is all I have for you, and I'll answer any questions that you have. One of the things that we do in addition to educating the communities and schools about suicide prevention is we really want to normalize the conversation around mental health, and we partner with organizations to put on what we call Stick It to Stigma events. They're really mental health awareness events. Most of what we've done up till now has been athletic events. Connor Ball, our namesake, was a baseball and a hockey player. So we partner with the UNH men's and women's. We partner with SNHU, with Berwick Academy, with Exeter High School, at lacrosse games, hockey games, I think just lacrosse and hockey at the moment. But we're willing to partner with any mental health, any organization to do some sort of mental health awareness event. So if you know of an organization that might be interested, please reach out. I always like to just highlight Tara in all of my trainings. So Tara is on that picture on the left, the second one down from the top. She's between the two hockey players there. That's Tara. She is Connor's mom. And she is the reason I'm here. And she is an inspiration to me. She took really the biggest tragedy in her life. And she says even now, 12 years later, that it is the most tragic thing that has ever happened to her. And she really turned it into something really, really amazing. So I always like to highlight her. And then lastly, just this past Sunday, we had our annual 5K. We do it every year during Suicide Prevention Month. We raised a lot of money this year. We're very excited. All the final numbers aren't in, but we think that we raised more this year than we did last year, so that's exciting. So if you're a runner or a walker, and you just like kind of being out in the sunshine, although it wasn't too sunny on Sunday, feel free to join us next year. It'll be around the same time, that third weekend in September. All right. So as you leave tonight, just some action steps. Just making sure that now that maybe you've thought a little bit more about warning signs, make sure that you're just kind of looking out for warning signs for the youth with any of the youth in your life. Helping youth just to kind of build some positive coping skills and some protective factors. And then just start, if you haven't yet, just start that conversation about mental health with your kids and just see where it leads and see, what your child responds to and kind of just take that first initial step. All right, and that's all I have for you. Oh my goodness, I'm so embarrassed, but this John Webb is not going to help you because he is in Goffstown. So I did this presentation with him not too long ago. The last time I did the family presentation was with him, so I apologize. But please reach out to me if you have any questions, or I can answer any questions now if anyone has anything for me. Thank you guys so much.